I personally know of no one more attuned to speak about resilience and trauma than Morgan Lindsey, who is soon to be Dr. Morgan Lindsey. She pre-recorded this interview because she is tapping into her own resilience right now, braving the wilds of Alaska. Please welcome Morgan as she speaks about understanding resilience, U-turn to return.
Hi everyone, my name is Morgan. I am coming to you today, not on a live talk, but on a recorded talk from Alaska. I'm currently sitting in Anchorage between a couple of trips that I've been taking out in national parks here. I'm a 37-year-old psychotherapist based in Austin, Texas, and I was invited to speak to you today about trauma. The truth is, I can't speak to you about trauma without also talking to you about resilience. My hope and longing is that you can take value from what I say and weave it into your own life and into your own wisdom as a parent and as a human being, and live an even higher quality of life, connection, love, and support. I hope this information brings you an opportunity to deepen your relationships and get more of the connection and love and satisfaction that you want. I often joke that my family was my first internship in personal growth and development. When I was 11 years old, I started reading parenting books, and as I began consuming books about parenting, I had hopes of helping my parents become better parents. It turns out you can't treat your own family, but the field of psychotherapy already knew this. I still like to think that somehow I broke through, and certainly I learned tools and different pieces along the way that helped me grow up and grow along my journey. The good news is that there's lots of opportunities to grow. The bad news, or maybe the news that doesn't get printed on most brochures, is that healing is a lifelong journey. There's several opportunities to upgrade your life along the way, but as I talk to you about trauma today, I want to invite you to keep in mind that healing is something that we do over the course of a lifetime, hopefully with several upgrades along the way. And my hope is that by the end of this talk, you not only feel a sense of upgrade, but you have tools that you can use to upgrade your own life as you address the challenges that re-entry may bring. So as I begin, let's get on the same page about what trauma is. There are a few ways to define trauma, but it's best understood as an overwhelming event or one that alters the way we process and recall memories, and it can even dictate and imprint our future decisions. Most simply put, trauma blocks love. Common side effects of trauma are shame, emotional withdrawal, isolation, and those things can make us feel alone and trapped, even powerless. More simply put, and how I think about trauma is that trauma can be the belief that what was is what will always be. So let me say that again. Trauma can be the belief that what was, what did happen, is what will always be and what will always play out. And healing is understanding that what was is not what will always be. And as cheesy as it sounds, love heals trauma. And as simple as it sounds, trauma blocks love. I also believe and have experienced in my own life that trauma can open a door to growth and resilience. Resilience is our ability to bounce back again and again from each and every obstacle we face. It's our capacity to adapt. Resilience is not inherent, but it is something that we develop over time. And in my opinion and in my research, it's clear to me that we help each other develop resilience. We don't do this alone. So let me tell you a story about a recent experience I had in the wilderness, and it's got ties all the way back into my own life as a high schooler. When I was 16 years old in high school, I was in some ways forced by my parents to go on a backpacking trip in Colorado with a group of teenagers. And what I didn't know going into that group as a 16-year-old was that the group of kids I was entering had already known each other for several years, and I was just meeting them for the first time. I was an introverted kid. I wasn't super confident. I didn't feel super comfortable in my own skin, and I had no idea what I had gotten into. And as I entered that trip, which was a week-long trip through the wilderness, I experienced a really isolating week. I was in some ways left out and maybe potentially bullied by some of the kids I was around. And I struggled the entire time I was there. I remember wanting to just call my parents and beg to come home every single day. And this was before there were cell phones and before there was an opportunity to do that. So I felt a little shaky earlier this month when I entered the wilderness for the second time in my life as a backpacker with a group of friends that I did know well. And even though this was a different group of friends and a different experience, even from the very beginning, I felt nervous and like I didn't even want to go. I love nature, I love the wilderness, but something inside of me was really resisting the experience. I was in unfamiliar territory. I was afraid of disappointing people. I was afraid of the unknown. We were being guided through the wilderness by a guide who knew our route, so we were not necessarily in charge of that. And as I strapped my 50-pound backpack to my back and started hiking, I remember feeling incredibly afraid. The truth is, my inner child was out and my inner adult was totally gone for a little while. And I was reminded of how quickly trauma can take over. There was really no immediate threat or no immediate danger, but I was already playing out stories of how I was going to be left out and alone and not fit in. And the funny thing is, when I talked to people or when I tried to share with them how I was feeling, they didn't totally get it and they mostly wanted to fix it. And while that was nice, I was tracking my own experience and noticing how it wasn't that relieving to me. Even in certain moments, I wanted to turn back and wished I could go home. But as I started to step into the experience and as I started to advocate for myself more and more, what I started to realize what a lot of my fears were fears that were living in my own mind and weren't actually playing out in reality. And the more that people were able to validate my feelings and the more I was able to validate my own feelings, the more centered I began to feel as I went through my week and my time in the wilderness. So I want to talk to you as I continue telling this story about what it might look or feel like to have what I would call a courageous conversation with your family, with you as parents, as partners, or with you and your kids that can yield an opening for a new experience. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's really hard to talk people out of their feelings. And so I don't recommend going down that path, but that doesn't leave us with a lot of tools. So I want to invite you to consider a really simple process that will help you unravel the fears that you or your children might have about re-entering your school experiences or your family experiences or your social experiences this next year. So it's a myth that we can sometimes not even realize we buy into, that in order to feel better, we need our external circumstance to change. In other words, we need something outside of us to change to make our insides feel better. So as we acknowledge that that's a myth, then we can enter a conversation where we begin the process of turning towards our feelings and our emotions. What that means is we make space to acknowledge how we feel, what our thoughts and judgments are, and what our beliefs are. Acknowledging and validating is different than fixing, and that can be hard to remember. So I'm going to say it again. Acknowledging and validating our fears is different than trying to fix something. So it can be helpful to turn towards what your own fears are and talk about them. And if we had more time, I would have you do an exercise with each other where all you did was listen to each other's feelings and notice how many different parts of you might want to try and fix that. It's human. It makes sense. Of course, we want to take each other's pain away, but a part of healing trauma and building resilience is finding the capacity to witness both our challenges and our successes. So step one is turning towards our feelings and our emotions, turning towards our thoughts and our judgments, and turning towards our beliefs. When I put my 50-pound backpack on this last week, I did not believe I would be able to walk 45 miles up and down mountains without trails on them for 8 days. I felt small and out of place, a little bit scared, and I judged myself as being literally the slowest person in our group, and I had a belief that that was not okay. Right? So being able to hear that from each other creates space to begin to have a new experience. It literally calms our brain down. The second thing that we can do for each other is validate. Validate is offering phrases that sound or look like, "It makes sense to me that you would feel that way," or "Based on what your experience is or has been, it makes sense to me that you feel concerned." Sometimes when the little people in our life, the young people, feel concerned, or even our own friends and family members, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying like, "Oh, that's not a fear, that's gonna play out." And that might be right, but the better thing and the more calming thing we can do for each other is say like, "Gosh, I totally understand why you would feel afraid of that." Or if we can't understand, to get curious and ask questions about that, right? So this is what I would call a U-turn, that we take a turn towards our own curiosity, our own thoughts and feelings, share them and get to know them better, as opposed to doing what is sometimes a lot more comfortable and in terms of trying to fix or convince someone to feel something else. As we validate what we say, it brings a sense of calm to our nervous system. It helps us feel like we don't have to run away. It helps us feel like we don't have a sense of threat that we need to fight. And it gives us an opportunity to return to relationship with a more holistic approach. The shadow side of not doing this is that sometimes we can return to a relationship hoping to convince someone to see the world the way we see it. What we want to do when we're going to honor or acknowledge overwhelm or something that's been challenging, or if we want to build resilience, is we want to return in a way where we can understand and see and get each other's experience. So after you turn towards your feelings and emotions, and after you validate what is going on inside of you, it offers you an opportunity to then return to what's going on that you're wanting to clear out. Right? So after I was able to turn towards my own fears and pay attention to what my beliefs actually were without trying to talk myself out of them, then I could return to my group. I could be curious. I could connect. I could stay a little bit more calm. I could voice what I wanted, and I could get conversations to help me feel understood instead of trying to solve a problem. And that offers a sense of what's called regulation, which is a way where we can start to hold on to our feelings and hold on to ourselves without feeling overwhelmed, and also without exiling or cutting off a vulnerable feeling. Right? So this is something that we do for ourselves, and it's also something that we do for each other. I think this matters a lot in the world of re-entering things after the pandemic. I think we have our own fears as adults that we're dealing with, and we also want to get regulated enough internally that we can hold some space for the younger people in our lives to feel a sense of being heard, being witnessed, and having a sense of regulation as well. It means that we have to take an inner journey at the same time, or close to the same time, that we get to know what's going on with our kids. And then part of the return in this courageous conversation is not changing the situation, but it's actually asking questions like, if there was a way that you could do that thing you want to do without feeling so afraid, what would it look like? And we can start to really hear each other. I got a lot of help as I traveled through the wilderness because I was willing to ask questions, because I was willing to get help being heard, and because I myself was able to hear and validate my own feelings, even if they weren't reasonable. Right? And that was not something that I experienced as a kid. As a kid, I felt bullied. As a kid, I felt scared. And as a kid, I didn't have the tools to articulate any of those feelings. Hopefully, you're not going backpacking in the wilderness as you re-enter the world and try to navigate all these things in a way where it would make it difficult for you to have these kinds of conversations. But what I do want to invite you to consider is that this is something that's very simple. It's actually not that complicated, but it can feel complicated because it can feel threatening to slow down without fixing. Trauma, or moments in our lives where we feel overwhelmed, are actually a door to growth and resilience that are trying to open. And we can help each other through those moments by being curious, by turning towards our own inner experience and sharing that with one another, by validating our own experience and sharing that sense of validation with one another, by having enough courage to trust that a new resolution will surface if we are willing to hear each other out. Because the truth is, a lot of times the resolution we're looking for is just an opportunity to feel safe together. And then we can return to what is being invited forward, and we can offer each other a sense of curiosity, a sense of connection, a sense of calm, and a sense of regulation in that process. We don't feel just one feeling. We feel multiple feelings at the same time, and this is a way of beginning to make space for that. Part of what makes trauma is that when we feel overwhelmed, we end up splitting ourselves off as we try to get through an experience. Part of what heals trauma is that we offer each other a holistic space to be witnessed, validated, and listened to. And when we can do that, we can bring more and more peace and calm into our lives while still facing all of the things that matter to us and navigating those in ways that make the most sense, right? Just holding a more holistic sense of understanding. So whether you're a beginner in unfamiliar territory, entering a new school, a new school year, a new way of being, or if you're afraid of disappointing people, or if you're afraid of the unknown, I invite you to turn towards a friend or a loved one, or start a conversation with your kids, and create a space where you can share both what you feel challenged by and what you feel grateful for, and build on that. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of your conference. If you want to learn more about the work I do or what I offer, you can contact me through the contact page on my website, www.morganlindsey.org. And I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Having concrete tools like the 4 steps is incredibly helpful. Morgan is right now above the Arctic Circle. Let's wish her well in her adventures.